I started the POLST Collaborative in Georgia in 2010, having become aware of the National POLST and the Oregon POLST several years before. Judy, can you tell us a little bit about you?
Yes. I am a registered nurse and a nursing home administrator. I've worked in quite different fields in my profession, from nursing home administrator, hospital administrator, director of nursing, and I worked with the state for 11 years, the State Department of Health in Tennessee. I've been doing consulting for the last 10 years with nursing homes, hospitals, but I've been working with TELP since the late 90s in getting endorsed. So I am president of the coalition in Tennessee.
All right, our topic for today has to do with POLST and the CMS civil monetary penalty funding. Judy's had experience with this. I've had experience. And Susan Nelson, who's under the weather, was going to be one of the co-presenters and from Louisiana, and she's had experience as well. So I think, let me just take it a little bit, and then Judy, if you can pick up. But basically, Judy and I are in what's called Region 4. There are 10 CMS regions around the country. The two of us are in an 8-region, southeastern region, if you will, from Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee. And our experience, Judy's and my experience, is because of our relationship with CMS Region 4 and a really marvelous supporting head of long-term care for CMS in Georgia, in the Southeast, or in Region 4, is Stephanie Davis. And Stephanie's been a big help throughout our region in supporting advanced care planning, end-of-life issues, as well as POLST in nursing home environments or long-term care environments. The civil penalty fund, monetary penalty funds, are those funds that are collected by the government as a result of improper claims or violation of Medicare requirements. And those funds are segregated to each individual state, and the state then moves the process along in terms of how to utilize those funds. The law provides for the collection and use of the funds imposed by CMS when nursing homes do not meet the requirements for participation. And interestingly, the Patient Protection or Affordable Care Act established that 90% of the federal portion of CMP funds could be used to support activities benefiting nursing home residents, including projects that assure quality of care within the nursing homes. Judy, you want to take up from here?
Sure. One of the things that under the in which I did provide quite a few attachments for folks, but the approval process that we were talking about, state, regional, and national, is probably how it's done, and every state is different. For Tennessee, in region, even in the Region 4 that we're in, every state has a different process. So for when you apply, and so that's very important to know what your state does. But the eligible organizations that the federal government says, consumer advocate organizations, residents or family councils, professional or state nursing associations, certified long-term care facilities. I mean, individual nursing homes can actually apply for these civil monetary penalties. And then private contractors, which is where our coalition, end-of-life coalition groups fit into. So it is accessible. the one thing that the CMP funds can be used for is only the benefit the residents in certified long-term care facilities, which means that you can't do a project and include assisted living, hospitals or adult daycare, or even community groups. It is designated because of the way the civil monetary penalties are collected. It has to be used in nursing homes, skilled nursing homes, intermediate care type residents. And that process, as I said, differs from state to state. Even though, Kentucky or North Carolina or in the Region 4, it's whatever the state does. Now, for Tennessee, which is different from Georgia, and Richard can share that with you, but in Tennessee, they got the request. The states have to request to CMS that they want to use the money. They want to use the civil monetary penalty money. But Tennessee established a grant program, okay? It's a pretty elaborate grant procedure and a process before your project ever gets to CMS Region 4 to be signed off of. So that's what makes it unique, because some states actually do grants and some just do directly contracting. And Richard, that is what y'all do in Georgia, correct?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So if you have to do if your state says, well, we will give the money out, but you've got to submit a grant, and these are the criteria, then that's what you go by. And that's what we did in Tennessee. So the project that I submitted, okay, was actually, they approved 3 projects. And the first project, which happened to be the project, advanced directives, training, post forms, those kind of things, and end of life, having conversations. So I got through the state part, and then it got to be signed off by Stephanie Davis, which is the contact person in this region. She didn't like our measurement outcomes, our measure objectives. So that she declined our civil monetary penalty grant, even though the commissioner of Tennessee and the Department of Health and the grant organization group in the department approved it. It didn't matter. You still have to get your regional office to sign it. So just and as we get on through here, Richard can share some things that I think would make a difference, and I do want to share some things that I think, and I do plan on applying again, okay? But I want to share with the group why I think it might do for each state, so that you might be successful. And I do think it's an opportunity to help long-term care do a better job at having those conversations and having the right forms. And I listed here, and it's in this information that we've supplied each person that's logged on, and the content. They do have, CMS does have a sample of what they would want submitted, the minimum requirements, and that is the purpose and the summary, and I don't have to read all those to you, but that's what they look for in the regional offices of each of the regions across the United States. So, Richard, I'm going to stop there and see if you wanted to comment on anything.
Well, the real thing is, I agree with Judy, and what we found in Georgia, and we were encouraged, is to look for collaboration. Don't let one organization just sort of like submit a grant, but look at different parts of your state that are engaged and work together. So in our case, we came together with a major hospital in Athens, Georgia, along with the Medical School of Georgia, and a professor at the medical school who was very much involved with advanced care planning and bereavement. So we put in a grant that combined that organization, those two organizations, with our organization. And the grant initially was for a pilot project in Macon, Georgia. So we went into Macon, and we went into 7 or 8 long-term care facilities in the greater Macon area with a program to explore, number one, what was the status currently with advanced care planning, advanced directives and POLST, and how are they handling bereavement in those long-term care or nursing homes. And it was not just talking about how they were. It's sort of like we drilled down into the whole piece, back down to the bedside. What were the nursing people at the bedside? How were they handling? What was their input? Were they being respected when they knew what they knew about the patient and their decisions that had really never at times been asked up the ladder when the patients even entered? And then we worked with people up the ladder all the way to the CEO of the nursing home. At the same time, we did a parallel piece in that same nursing home where we were talking to the patient and the patient's family. And we were really looking for and found a serious disconnect between the two sides, if you will, the caregivers and the recipient being the patient. And from that, we were able to develop some documents that we could use for educational purposes and came up with 2 documents that we are going to use going forward that we developed from these interactions in these 7 or 8 nursing homes. And we were able to develop a document for, if you will, the staff on how to approach patients about advanced care planning, about education, and the like. We have a separate document informing patients and their families about what is advanced care planning. How do you handle that? What kind of documents can you use for documenting? What is an advanced directive? What is a POLST? How do you talk to people about this? How do you have a conversation? And we're fortunate we did that for 1.5 years with a grant, and we are now in the process of expanding that at the request of the CMS group to do the same work that we've learned and now to start to put it in place through different regions in the state of Georgia. Again, we're working with the same collaboration, but we're also adding to that leading edge of Georgia and their work in the field, so that we've got a collaboration really of 4 entities that are working together, all working together to promote long-term care decision-making within those environments. And hopefully we will receive that grant. The one thing I add to what Judy said is her issue got stopped at the region level, but even the region has to provide that up to the national, and national must accept the regional recommendation. So it's usually pretty perfunctory, is my understanding. But in fact, it can be stopped anywhere along the way. Judy, do you have any other thoughts you want to bring in at the moment?
One of the things that I think what our project was involved with, which we have about 325 nursing homes in Tennessee. I did a mail out to the nursing homes to see who would like to participate in an educational session, so that we actually would identify 2 to 3 people in each nursing home to how to have a conversation, as well as using the tools to have conversations, because different types of people are having those conversations. So we had too many nursing homes. We had 70 nursing homes to respond. And actually, when we cut the date off, we still were getting letters that they wanted to participate in the project. But that was probably too many to start with. So if you're going to do one, start on a smaller scale, and then so that your budget, our budget was like $150,000, I think, $160,000. So for the year, but to actually develop some brochures, but to do some specific training, and we had it set up in 4 regions of the state, because to go to Johnson City to Memphis, that's a long, long way apart. So we were probably, was doing a lot. And so I don't know if those were criteria that, that was not reasonable, but we did have our measurable outcomes that met Tennessee's requirement, but Stephanie didn't like them. But the information, and I think it's really important that I've tried to give, is the contact information for whoever the civil monetary penalty is in each of the states, so that you have a contact person to go to, and there's the regional director in each of the regions, so that's a start spot too. But trying to find out, do you have to do a grant, or is it just about a contract? Contracts are very simple. I mean, much simpler than trying to do the grant writing. So in giving you that information, I think that helps. And I did attach some, for 2016, some funded projects. Now, not any of the projects. Richard's project, I think I must have got 2016. It's not in the documents that I supplied to the group. It's not, right? So I didn't see any of those, but those were example projects that got approved in different states, okay? So I thought that might be interesting for folks to see what has been approved. I know that Advanced Directive is on CMS's top radar at this point, so I think it's a good opportunity for any of the states that needs funding to go for that money.
And the nursing home. I want to add one thing also, and that is, for those who haven't read it, it's worth going to look for, you can do it on the internet, the IOM report, Dying in America. It came out in 2015, and it lays out a plan going forward for how to work with end-of-life issues, advanced care planning, POLST, palliative care, nursing home work, as well as how to help people, reside and be cared for in their own homes. But I think it's it's 500 pages, so don't read the whole thing. But there is an executive summary of about 3 to 4 pages, which I think will give you a sense of where CMS is going in terms of future. It's not a CMS document, but CMS was part of the formation of the document, and I think it's helpful because I think it's going to be a long-term roadmap in this area. And I also want to reiterate what I said earlier, and that being that I really think you need to look and do what we did and what Judy just said. You start small, get a small grant, prove the worth of what you want to do, and then start to scale it up to something that's broader. And I know that Stephanie Davis is trying to get us to work on, not meaning Georgia, but all of the states in her region to start working with these end-of-life issues in nursing homes so that she can start to come up with some best practices to spread to all of the states. And the only way that happens is with projects like these. My understanding is that there's a fair amount of money in this pot, more than you might think. It's not uncommon for a long-term care organization to get hit with $250,000, $500,000, or even $1 million type penalty. So they've got some money to distribute, and I encourage people to think about that.
I think the money in Tennessee, and it's pretty much, Tennessee's been hit with quite a few civil penalties, but the way they calculate that is if you get, and some of the facilities have gotten as much as $3 million, $1 million, $500,000, but depending on the percentage of your Medicaid and your Medicare patients, that's how it's divided with the states. But in Tennessee, I think the pot is over $20 million that's there, that's been saved up for several years. Now, this grant or this money actually, and I did send you the emails that comes out from CMS as to when this was started. So actually it was approved for use in 2012, but the process has not been gotten in place in many of the states, because if your state, but they have already assigned a CMP director to call. So you call those people, and if they've not requested the money for your state, then that you would need to, encourage them to do that, but to, so that you can turn in a request for some funding on a project. So now I know that Susan, that was supposed to present, Louisiana did get some money to do some end-of-life care work. So, and it's too bad she's not on the call, because they've done very well with their project.
Well, actually, I am on the call, but I keep coughing, so
okay.
I haven't been able to. Anyway. So in Louisiana, we were able to we've gotten in the last 3 years about $450,000 from the civil monetary penalty funds. And when we went to the state, we really talked to them about the fact that the number 2 reason why nursing homes get fined is actually failure to follow the care plan, which includes the advance directive. So we went from that standpoint to really looking at how we could do some projects to improve advance directive implementation in long-term care facilities. So our projects have been to develop a toolkit for advanced care planning for the nursing home staff. And if you go on the La Poste website, it's there for anybody who wants to take it and use it. And then the second one was to develop some more education for families and caregivers of people in long-term care facilities. And we developed an 11-minute video that one of the former news anchors in Louisiana did with us, and that's available also to be shown. It's pretty non-state specific, and that was really an educational thing. The problem that we had was that while we went to the state to get funding, and the funding was approved for January 1, 2016 through December 31st, 2016, the state didn't release the funds until the middle of July. And so then we only had 5 months to really implement what we wanted to do, sort of design, and we had it designed, but it was hard to implement, and then really spend all the money in 5 months because they really, they said, oh yeah, we'll pay you, but we really were skeptical of that. And then For this year, we applied again, and we received funding, and it's for January 1 through May 31st, or June 30th, I guess. And what we're going to be doing is some focus training in Acadiana, which is the area around Lafayette, Louisiana, with long-term care facilities. And we have 3 specific educational pieces there. They have a really aggressive post-acute care coalition involving home health and hospice, as well as the long-term care facilities. And so the audience, despite the fact that the money is for nursing homes, will also include home health and hospice, which certainly could use the information as well. So some of our things have been that as soon as we get people trained, the turnover in long-term care facilities is more than 100% every year. And so you get people trained and then they leave, and then you have to start all over again. So, our biggest obstacles have not been necessarily getting the money, but getting the money in a timely fashion, and then being able to replicate our education. And so that's why most of it's on, or all of it is on the website. So look.
Hey, doctor, have you been to the doctor?
I have.
Yeah, I think we just got a request for the Louisiana toolkit, which I can email to I can email the website that Susan was referring to everyone afterward. Richard and Judy, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to if you had to provide any quality metrics after getting the money to show that your projects were progressing.
Yes, there's an absolute requirement. At least in the Georgia piece, we're required to find a way to document after the work we've done, we have to be able to document the success, the failure, what we've learned in a quantitative way. So there is data that we're required to provide as part of that process.
Yes. That's part of it with a grant or even with a contract. You have to provide reports on how you are progressing and showing some positive outcomes or some results. That's the expectation. And I think that's in, if you look in that transmittal, that's the 1213 nursing home transmittals, that's actually the content, the approval. So CMS sends those out to nursing homes when they're making changes, and that is in one of the attachments that they talk about the expectations.
And Judy or Richard, do you have to report these results annually or quarterly?
For Tennessee, it was quarterly reports, but you had to do the final. What was expected was at the end you had to produce your report.
Very honestly, I can't remember whether we did a quarterly or an every 6-month update, if you will, or progress report, and then we needed a final report. It was fairly elaborate. It was a good 10-page report that talked about not only the data piece, but it talked before that of what we had learned programmatically, what we had learned from families, what we had learned from staff, and the product of it. We were able to show that we had developed these 2 education modules for use in the long-term care world, and then we had the data that went along with that. So it was pretty comprehensive. I would suggest that they mean to be and they intend to be pretty thorough in what they're doing. This is not just money given out to anybody and just go do what you want with it. They're pretty exacting about it, and I give them credit for that too.
So in Louisiana, we early on asked the state if they would add a question on Section S as in Sam to the MDS that asked if the patient had an advance directive. It's already on there. Does the patient have an advance directive? Does the patient have a healthcare power of attorney? And we asked them to add, does the patient have a LaPoste document? Two unintended consequences of that. One is nursing home MDS coordinators tend to do what the questions ask. So we had to then re-educate people that the LaPoste document was not for everybody in a long-term care facility, and particularly in Louisiana, our document specifies in the law, because we're the only one that has it in statute, that you wouldn't be surprised if the patient died in 6 months, so sort of hospice criteria. So some of the facilities, and one of the things at the national POLST level is that the POLST document should not be used as a code status document. It's much more than that. It's a process to elicit what the patient's care wishes are with advanced illness. So the unintended consequence of that was that some facilities felt like everybody needed a LaPoste document, and we've since reversed that education. But one of the things about having that in Section S was that we were able to see an uptick in patients who didn't have it. They're supposed to have those done every quarter, have a care plan every quarter so that the MDS gets updated. And so we've seen a gradual uptake in the amount of LaPoste documents. And then we've had to do an interim report at 6 months and then a final report at 1 year. The other thing that we found was really helpful is having experienced grant writer who wrote our grants. And I'm happy to, if you email me, I'm happy to provide the name of the grant writer who has a business doing it and does a really good job, obviously, because we got that much money from this. So
what support National might be able to give along these lines as well?
Well, I would like to mention that our National POLST Forum is a great place to go for resources and also ask additional questions. And we encourage people to go there to ask questions and provide answers. If you need access to the forum, please email me, Hannah, HANNA, @POLST.org, and I will look into giving you access. I was wondering, actually, if we could circle back. We have another comment that I would, let's see here. The comment is, I've heard several states say they were not approved because their outcome measures were not approved. Richard or Judy, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Judy, you might talk best to it. You had a problem with that.
What was you saying? I didn't understand your question, Hannah.
Yeah, it sounds like someone heard that states their application did not get approved because their outcome measures were not approved.
Right. That was the letter that I received from CMS, Stephanie, is that the quality measures were not, the objectives were not measurable, okay? That was the only criticism that we had, okay? Now, we had to modify those. That was one of the things that Tennessee Department of Health folks wanted it how we presented it, okay? Because we changed that. I don't have right before me what our measures were, but I'll be glad to share those with the group. But I don't know if that was the real reason. My gut feeling is it had set in CMS for 45 days, and they have to make a decision in 45 days. That's that's in the federal regulation. So it was like, and I don't know if she had time to review it in total, but that's what happened. So we will go back again. They're actually in Tennessee. They're actually changing the individual that is the civil monetary penalty contact person in Tennessee. So there was a flawed. Our process in Tennessee had a few flaws in it. Okay, so the commissioner is actually hiring 2 new persons to actually do this civil monetary penalty grant and to try to expedite it getting out of state government to CMS. So we're in a changing process by itself. So that's why just be, now that you know who to call in your state, find out what the process is, and they should help you and work with you. And even though the projects that were denied in the state, they were not really forthcoming as to why they got denied, and they were real sticklers. If you didn't get it right by this certain date, you were automatically disqualified if you didn't do the right typeset and all this kind of stuff. So they actually, one of the rounds in Tennessee with the civil monetary penalty, they were so stringent that they didn't get anybody to apply one round, and they had to open it back up because nobody was applying because everybody was getting disqualified before they ever got started. So
yeah,
it was discouraging. Yeah, go ahead.
One of the things that we found is, and maybe it has to do with being in Atlanta, and I understand that reality, but one of the things we found was that we could get some consultative help. So I encourage calling sort of your local board, whoever is handling the CMP funds, is to sort of try to make an approach to them in a way in which they'll be an assistance to you. We found out fairly early that just sort of blindly going along was not productive, and that what we needed to do, in fact, was to go and sort of say, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Or what are we missing here? And we really got some help from them. They were supportive with us with that type of an approach. But Judy's correct. Once you put that in, if you've got 3 things missing, they're not going to come back and say you've got 3 things missing, fix those, and then bring it back. They're just simply going to deny it. That's right. How they operate. That's exactly, not nice, but that's how they operate.
Right. They will go strictly by the rules. The difference between Georgia and Tennessee, actually, Georgia, Richard, they're dealing directly with Stephanie, which is the regional director, Region 4 director. So they're doing it by contract as opposed to what Tennessee does, and they're actually doing the grant. So it's 2 different processes, but it's in the same region. So that's why it may be a little bit different. Richard's actually dealing directly with the region and not going through the state.
Well, we are, but indirectly.
Right.
I mean, the state's informed, and they're supporting what we're doing, but we are, in fact, being able to get more consultative support from the region itself.
Right. and that makes a big difference too. Now, I did work with the Department of Health, so I knew in working with the Department of Health, and I met with the Commissioner of Health, and I knew he was very high on improving end-of-life care and advanced directives. So I knew that the department was supportive, and that's the key. You really need whatever department in your state is driving the civil monetary penalty, you may have to educate them on why end-of-life care is important if it's not on their radar. I went through a year and a half, and what was on the radar for Department of Health was immunization and, child health and those kind of things. End-of-life care was not on the radar. And I finally, with persistence, so you may have to have some meetings with the department in your state to make sure you get them on board and before you apply.
Yeah. Well, that's true. The other thing we're doing here in Georgia, we're not successful yet, but we've had strong encouragement. We've gone to the Department of Public Health and asked them to consider making end-of-life advanced care planning issues a initiative going forward for the Department of Public Health. They are considering that, and we may make some progress with that in the coming year or two. But if you can get the Public Health Department to make this type of a project and these issues a public health initiative, that can go a long way. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, Teresa Yang asked the question, can folks access the final report? I honestly don't know the answer to that. I honestly don't know whether they're confidential, i.e., you have to go through CMS to get them, or whether we have the ability to give them to you. I just don't know the answer.
And Richard or Judy, I'm also wondering if you could speak to a question from Amy. She was wondering if there was any value in the application to be able to say where you can, if you can share the information nationally, like if you can disseminate your state work on a national website or via social media.
Share the grant, Steph? I mean, I have shared our project, which, with I think it may have been the state of Arizona. I forget which state I shared it with because, it's all about all states having the money to do, because we're all faced with the same problems, and that is people are not having conversations, and long-term care certainly needs the help to improve the quality of life in a nursing home and quality of care. So I don't have a problem sharing what we wrote and submitted, and it would have to be tweaks for whatever is for your state, because if you can cut out some of the research material that you're using and just use some of the thoughts of what we were trying to do, I don't have a problem with sharing it with anyone, okay? We have a person
I'm wondering, Hannah, I'm wondering if you could talk to Amy and see if maybe it is productive for National POLST to be a repository for some of this information.
Right.
We have a grant writer that is working with us on our project. So we're actually working on one right now for community with some different regions in the state have foundations that for their specific area. So we're trying to get a community education project going where you do some whether it's senior citizen groups, church groups, but trying to encourage people. It's a small. It's going at it in a small way, but that's pretty much some of our seniors. That's the only way you can make contact. So we're working on that now. I mean, we always keep trying. We never get beat down.
Great. Well, I don't have any other questions, and I don't see any other questions that have come in. Do either of you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with us?
The only thought I have is don't be discouraged. There is money here, and it really can help you take your issues out into the community. And funding for this kind of work is not that easy to find. So I strongly encourage people not to be discouraged, but to, in fact, be pretty proactive about it.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you both so much for your time this afternoon. Really appreciate it, and thank you to all those who listened in. Have a great afternoon then. Bye.
You too. Good luck to everybody.